Hello, book lovers. Welcome to Must Love Books. Hello, and welcome back to Must Love Books podcast. Today, I am here with author Keshe Chow to celebrate the release day for The Girl with No Reflection. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. For those listeners who are not familiar with Keshe, she is a Malaysian-born Chinese-Australian author of fantasy, romance, and speculative fiction. She has won the 2020 Pareto Prize, the 2021 Rachel Funari Prize for Fiction, the 2021 Yara Literature Prize, the 2022 Victorian Premier's Prize for an Unpublished Manuscript, and the 2023 Uncharted Thrilling Story Award. The Girl with No Reflection is her debut novel after winning all of these awards. Amazing. Congratulations.
Thanks so much.
So I would love for you to tell us from your own words about The Girl with No Reflection.
Well, The Girl with No Reflection is basically about a Chinese coded princess who gets pulled into like a dark mirror world. And when she's there, she finds out that the reflections in the mirrors aren't actually reflections, but they're sentient creatures that have been previously cursed to mimic us. So she is tasked with closing the barrier between the mirror world and our own world in order to sort of save humanity, I suppose. But then she ends up falling in love with one of the reflections. So yeah, it's kind of inspired by Chinese mythology. It's got lots and lots of romance because that's what I really vibe off. And yeah, it's just hopefully a lot of fun.
And I am so excited to get to read this one. I have been watching your posts about it on Instagram for, by the time this comes out, for months now. For months.
It's a long road to get published.
Counting the days. It is a long road to get published. Some things I swear I've waited years for some books to finally be released. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your publishing journey?
Yeah, so it's typical, I guess, of most writers. I wrote a lot when I was a child and through high school, mainly short stories, and, did a lot of like making up things when I was younger, had a very, very sort of active imagination. Some would say too active. But then, yeah, I sort of graduated from high school, went into university, ended up pursuing like a completely unrelated career that was very heavily academic and also just really kind of demanding. So, and I ended up sort of specializing in a specific field that took a lot of time, basically. So for probably more than a decade, I didn't do any creative writing. I just did academic writing and published scientific papers and all that sort of stuff. And then, yeah, I got to kind of 2020, and obviously it was pandemic times, but I was an essential. I'm a vet by trade. So we were essential workers. So it wasn't really like my life was any kind of less busy than usual. It was still the same, except that there were less social events. Not that I'm very social anyway, but basically we got to 2020 and I'd done everything that I wanted to do in my career. So I'd, done my specialist qualification. I'd opened a business. I'd sold that business. I'd gotten my master's. I'd had 2 kids. I had, done basically everything else that I could think of that I wanted to do with my life. And then I circled back to, I think I'd really like to try to write a book. So, and I tried to sort of come up with ideas over the years and never really felt confident that I could actually write a book. So I was just like, well, I've got time now, so I'm just going to give it a go. So I started writing. My initial efforts were terrible. Like I would go back and read some of that early work and I would cringe at it. But I just sort of kept on writing and I started sort of swapping with critique partners and getting feedback and learning a lot from writers that were more experienced than me. I wrote a whole book, which I ended up querying, and I didn't really get very far with that, so I shelved it. And then I actually wrote another book, a kid's book, a middle grade book. which I wrote a complete first draft for, but I never did anything with that as well. It's just still sitting on my hard drive. And then I wrote this book. So I sort of came up with the idea late one night and thought, yeah, that sounds like it's pretty creepy. And yeah, so I just sort of wrote it over 3 months. I started getting some beta feedback from it. And I think by that stage, because I'd already written the other two books, I'd kind of really developed my own author voice a lot better than I had when I first started out. And yeah, and then I queried that one, signed with an agent after a couple of months of querying. We edited it quite heavily and then went on submission in mid 2022. And then about sort of 5.5, 6 weeks later, I had my first call with Lydia Grigorovich from Delacorte, who's now my editor. And yeah, she signed the book. So ended up sort of getting into that whole rigmarole, I guess, of traditional publishing where you're editing and then you've got like about 1 billion rounds of editing and more copy edits and line edits and sensitivity reading. And I just feel like I've read this book now like, I don't know, 100 or more times. And yeah, now we're sort of less than 2 months away from launching it. It just feels like it's been years in the making. So that's basically how my story went.
Well, I mean, it has been years in the making.
It has been, yeah. I mean, I think I relatively had a relatively short journey compared to some people, but yeah, it just still feels like it's been a lot. And I think I just went really hard in the beginning because I wrote those first 3 books in about 18 months, and as well as lots of short stories, as you can probably tell from my bio. Yeah, I think I just got a little bit. I think I was making up for lost time, essentially, because of all that time that I hadn't fed my creative well. And yeah, then all of a sudden it just became unleashed.
Yes.
And I had so many ideas and not enough time to write them.
An explosion of creativity.
Pretty much, yeah, it felt like that. And then I burned out. And I had to take a big long break where I just watched a lot of Downton Abbey.
You know what? I feel that.
Yes. I think sometimes you just need to have a brain. And I think that, any of that media can feed your creative well. Like I was so inspired by so many things in the media that I watch and other books that I read. So yeah, I think resting is often as important as producing when it comes to creativity.
That is an excellent way of putting it. Resting is such an important part of the creative process. You can only,
It is.
put so much out without, replenishing yourself. It's kind of the whole pouring from an empty cup.
Yes.
Analogy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, you got to refill your cup so that you can give us more content.
Yeah, that's right. Refill the creative cup. I like that.
I love that. And, that big unleashing of your creative side has won you several awards. I would love to hear more about these. Congratulations on each and every one.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. I mean, a lot of it I think comes down to a little bit of just right judge and the right time. It's pretty much like publishing. Signing with an agent is the right agent at the right time. A lot of it is timing. And same with signing with a publisher. It's like you land on the right editor's desk at the right time. And if it had been another editor's desk or a different time, you might not get that. So I think particularly with this book actually won quite a major award in Australia called the Victorian Premier's Prize for an Unpublished Manuscript. I'm just like stumbling over the words there. But yeah, I think like any other year, it might not have won because that the award tends to be very skewed towards very highbrow literary fiction. So when I was shortlisted, I was like, oh, look, this is amazing. I'm so proud of being shortlisted, but I doubt I'm going to get to the end because, they'll probably pick something which is way smarter. Not like my kind of, fun romp through a mirror world with lots of kissing scenes. But they liked it. So it just happened to be that I had a panel of judges that were, fantasy fans and liked genre fiction that year. And yeah, just kind of got lucky with judges. So, but yeah, I also put myself out there a lot. I entered a lot over that first sort of couple of years. I've slowed down a lot now just because I write a lot less short fiction purely because of timing. My books suck all of my time at the moment. But yeah, I wrote a lot of short fiction while I was waiting to hear back from queries. And when I was on submission, I just wrote and wrote and wrote. And lots of them, have stayed on my hard drive, never to see the light of day. A few of them, seemed like they were a little bit more, I don't know, resonated with me more. So I sent them out there and either got them published or entered them into contests. And yeah, so just kind of got lucky but it's been fun. Like, it's been fun. And I think, you just never know how your work is going to land. It's really just so subjective that it's just about kind of sending it out there and then hoping for the best. And yeah, it's nice when people sort of feel like there's something they can take from your work, I suppose.
That's beautiful, truly. And so how about can you tell us a little bit about your writing inspirations?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this a bit earlier. I'm inspired a lot by other media I consume. So I think I've had my writing described as being quite cinematic, and I think that's because I'm often inspired by movies, film, TV that I watch when I write. I think a lot of people say this, that when they write, it's like a film is playing in their head. So it's not even really like I am the character. It's like I'm watching the scene from, like, as though I'm watching it on a screen. And so yeah, that's a big inspiration. And obviously for my first and second YA fantasy, so I've got another one coming in 2025, I've drawn heavily from Chinese mythology as well. So I've looked into kind of, the Chinese mythology, the stories that I grew up with, because my parents were always sort of like telling me stories, and I went to Chinese school and I learned about all the mythology through there. But at the same time, I grew up, you can tell from my accent, I grew up in Australia, very Aussie, very Aussie upbringing from that point of view. Watched a lot of like Western media as well. So like a lot of the film and TV that I grew up with was sort of Western based, either American or British or Australian. And so it's kind of like an amalgamation of those two things. It's kind of like, I call it a love letter to like all the Eastern and Western fantasy that I grew up with. So I just pull inspiration from everywhere. And often there's a little bit of inspiration from my own life too. And I think, I think having been through so much stuff, I guess, over the years, I think sometimes not necessarily that any of the characters like are directly drawn from any one person, but sometimes they have characteristics of people that I know. And I just sort of pull that all into, character to hopefully make them, real. I've got obviously The Girl with No Reflection, which is coming out in August, on August 6th in the US and August 8th in the UK. And it's the 6th in Australia too. And there's a bunch of other countries, but I actually do not know when they're releasing in those countries. I get very little information from them. And then I have my second YA fantasy also coming out with Delacour Press in 2025, which will be just a bit over a year later, I think. They haven't set the date yet. And that one is what I like to call my Wuthering Heights cross with Inception, but with ghosts book. And basically, I was inspired by a tiny little thing I came across once, again, when I was trawling the internet. I think I do a lot of like late night trawling, as we all do, scrolling on our phones when we can't sleep, and came across this idea that in Chinese mythology that ghosts could die and become ghosts of ghosts. And so I started thinking, well, how far can this go? Like if a ghost can die and become a ghost of a ghost, can then a ghost of a ghost die and become a ghost of a ghost of a ghost? And so I started sort of thinking, because Inception is actually one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's so clever. And so I started sort of coming up with this idea about, a young woman who has to pursue her grandmother who died, as well as pursue like an ex-lover who had betrayed her down through the layers of the afterlife, to try and exact her revenge and save her grandmother. And so it kind of eventually, I think initially I didn't have the Wuthering Heights aspect of it, but Wuthering Heights and Bronte, basically, the Bronte sisters' work is one of my all-time favorites, classics. I love Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights and all that sort of stuff. And so when I brought that aspect into it, it just really solidified kind of the framework for the book and gave it kind of like a vibe, which is very gothic and a little bit horror. And yeah, it just kind of went from there. So that's my book that's coming out. That's actually what I'm working on at the moment. So I'm currently editing that book because the lead times in publishing are obviously so long. So we're always working sort of like 1 to 2 years ahead of our books coming out. And yeah, hopefully this one is probably, I mean, The Girl with No Reflection has its dark moments, but this one is pretty dark. It goes pretty dark. So yeah, I'm excited for everyone to kind of read that one too.
Honestly, I'm excited to read that as well. I loved
Yeah.
how you described it. Wuthering Heights with Inception and ghosts.
Yes, I know. It's an odd mixture, but I guess I am an odd consumer of media. Like I have very wide-ranging tastes, and yeah, even in the books I read, it's just I have not, I read very widely through genres and things. So yeah.
Well, I personally am a huge fan of books that kind of bend genres together.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Me
when you
too.
have,
Yeah.
some fantasy with romance and then, sprinkling some horror in for a little
Yes.
bit of a
Yeah.
gothic fantasy vibe, I
Yeah.
love that. I am here
Yeah, me
for it.
too. Yeah, I love that too. And I think it's a bit hard for me to stay in one lane just because I do read so widely. If I just read one genre, I think it would be easier to sort of like stick to single genre conventions. But again, my first book that I wrote that is currently shelved, hopefully I can revive it one day because I still really like that book, is like this speculative sci-fi fiction with thriller vibes, and it's just like mishmash of genres as well. And yeah, I kind of feel like I'm kind of incapable of writing something that's just like kind of straight and narrow one. But yeah, I think that's just, I think it can be a turn off for some people. Some people like, well, I didn't really expect it to go that way. So, but other people really like it. So it's just dependent. Again, it's very subjective. Reading is subjective, writing is subjective. So yeah, it's one of those things that can be a bit polarizing.
Definitely. I mean, I can see why some people, prefer their genres to stick within their genres. Me personally, I think that books that kind of bend genres really just stand out and create just unique perspectives and really just kind of pioneer whole new ways of looking at genres and addressing these, tropes and the themes behind each genre. And I think that is, an excellent thing for a writer to do to kind of just stand out and really create something entirely new, entirely rememberable. Rememberable? No, memorable.
Yeah, totally understood what you meant.
Words are hard
You're mixing
sometimes.
up words here. You're not just mixing genres, you're actually mixing words.
Exactly, exactly. It was intentional. It was for the bit.
Totally intentional. Yes, totally. Yeah, I love, I mean, I love reading like straight genre fiction as well, and I love reading genre mashups, and I think yeah, I think there's room for every which way of ways that we can do things because yeah, sometimes you do just want to read something that, is comforting and you know what to expect, and that fulfills all the promises that it gave you. And sometimes you want to read something that pushes the boundaries a little bit. And yeah, sometimes you want to read something that really, messes you up. But yeah.
So when it comes to your writing process, are you more of a plotter? Do you just kind of fly by the seat of your pants? How do you tackle the actual process of writing your stories?
Yeah, so I was always a pantser. So I always basically just started at the beginning. I write chronologically in general, although my second book has a bit of, some flashbacks. So I went in and wrote them later just so I could kind of stay on one timeline and get into the groove a little bit more easily. But I tend to write chronologically from the beginning to the end. And yeah, I sort of always just sort of discovered what happened as I went. And when I write a book, I'm often like so immersed in the world that it almost feels like the real world kind of ends up fading away, and I am actually like in this other world and walking through the world with like the characters around me and a forest setting or whatever. And my husband's always like, you seem really distant. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm actually like not in the world at the moment. My head is elsewhere. So it kind of comes to me, I'm always thinking about it, and sometimes I'll just be like, walking along or like doing dishes or something, and I'll be like, "Look, that's what's going to happen next," and it will just come to me, and then I'll sit down and write it. That being said, sometimes when I get about sort of halfway through or like a good chunk of the way through, and I sort of have an idea of what's going to happen to reach the end, I then sit down and map out kind of like a bit of a plan for the rest of the book, just because I've kind of formulated the whole arc at that stage. And then the other aspect is that my second book that I sold to Delacorte was actually sold on proposal. So it was my option book, which is basically where the publisher that you published with before gets right of first refusal. They want to look at your next work before you take it to anyone else. So we sent our proposal to Lydia, which is basically 3 chapters and an outline, which is something I never had to do. I never had to write a full outline from the very beginning without having written most of the book first. And so that was hard. It was challenging. So I had to sort of sit down and really think about where I wanted to take the book, even though I hadn't written it yet. And so I was kind of forced to be a plotter in that situation. But that being said, I ended up deviating from my plot, particularly with the ending, quite a bit. So, which gave her a little bit of she ended up having a bit of a jump scare from it because the ending ended up quite different from what she was like. I was expecting this like happy ending, and then you slammed me with this, and I'm like, yeah, no, sorry. I think the discovery writer will never completely leave me. But yeah, I think once you're sort of contracted to write books, I think that sometimes you've got to change your method a little bit. So yeah, that was interesting experiment, plotting out a whole outline before I wrote the book.
I love that. And then, it's a great way to be able to experiment different methods of writing.
Yes, yes. I think it did help in the end get the book down, because I was really stuck on that book for a long time, actually. The Girl with No Reflection, which I previously called Fauna of Mirrors, actually based after the short story it was inspired by. I just wrote, again, chronologically, sat down. I was always writing at night back then because, I was working and had kids and stuff. So I was always writing like late at night in the dark. My toddler was co-sleeping with me in bed, and I just wrote it. Like every night I would pick up my computer and I just write, and I just write from the beginning to the end, and it took me 3 months. Second book, which I started writing when I was on submission with that first book, has taken me like a year and a half to finish, basically, because I was trying to write it amongst working on my other book. So it was the first time I ever had to kind of chop and change between projects. Before, I was always like writing one book to completion, querying that or whatever I did with it, or shelving it, and then writing the next one, and then finishing that one and writing the next one. So I never had to like overlap my projects. And again, like I said, I get really immersed in my world, so it takes me a little while to shift between projects. So I was like juggling sort of editing The Girl with No Reflection and trying to write my new book, which is called For No Mortal Creature. And so it sort of, it was so piecemeal. Like I was writing it in small, like a few weeks I would spend on that one, and then I'd have to go back to editing the other one. So it was really hard to sort of like get myself in the zone. And secondly, it was a more ambitious kind of, I guess stylistically a little bit more ambitious, and it's an ambitious concept. There were a lot of when you write, it's because there's a lot of ghosts in the book. When you write a ghost book, a lot of the normal kind of narrative techniques you would use for interiority cannot be used. So, which is I rudely discovered that when I started trying to write emotions, show emotions. Ghosts don't have any pounding hearts. They don't have sweat springing on their brows. They don't have breath hitching in their throats or breath catching in their chest. And I was like, oh my goodness, all my usual techniques to sort of show emotion I cannot use. They don't blush. They don't have blood. So
I never thought of it that way before,
yes,
but you were
nor did
so
I.
right.
Nor did I. And I don't, I did not think of this before I started writing. And it was only when I started writing, I was like, this is really hard. So I had to develop whole new ways of showing that sort of stuff. And then, yeah, I think everyone talks about book twos being hard anyway, but I think I made life very difficult for myself. And so it was difficult. It was a really hard book to draft. So when I sold it and I had the 3 chapters down, but I actually had already written like about 2/3 of it very badly, very badly. And I had the outline, and then Lydia sort of looked at the outline and she was like, look, I think we can massage the plot a little bit here and change it. So that was really helpful. And so based on the outline and her feedback, I was then able to sit down and complete it. And I actually scrapped like a lot of it. I scrapped like probably half of what I had written already and started again. And so, yeah, I mean, I never plotted before, but I do have to say it did help me with this book because it was a very difficult book to write, and it was going really off the rails. And yeah, having that sort of outline to stick to mostly until the end did help me to get it down. So, I'm very sorry to say that plotting does help with drafting because I was always like a hardcore pantser. So yeah, but it did help in that case. I don't know that I would always do it that way, but yeah, it's good to have different tools in your bucket. And I think sometimes, yeah, like I said, when I do write that plan, when I'm halfway through, it's because I get a bit stuck sometimes. And then I'm like, okay, I need to see it laid out, chapter by chapter so that I kind of know how to get to this ending that I know I want. So it's kind of a bit of a map of sorts.
I can definitely agree with that. I think, plotting even just, small sections can just kind of help keep you on target and work your way through a section, especially if you're stuck. And I think that's excellent advice for any writer out there tackling a manuscript that they're struggling with, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like if something's not working, then try a different technique because otherwise you just end up sort of hitting your head against a brick wall. But yeah, I think like you're a writer as well, aren't you? Are you generally a
Yes,
plotter
I
or a
am.
pantser?
I am, I guess, a bit of both. I have 2 main projects that I'm working on, and I really, depending what mood I'm in and what
Yes.
TV shows I'm watching, what medium consuming will inspire, what I'm in the mood to be writing on. One is a complete rewriting of an old fan fiction I wrote in high
Oh,
school
amazing.
a good 15 years ago now.
Wow. Amazing.
And with that one, I have done, there was a very loose idea of an outline, very bare bones, though. It was really more of like an overarching plot idea than an outline. And
Yes.
so for that one, I'm more just kind of going with the flow of things. And
Yes.
I'm actually almost finished with, God, probably my 4th or 5th draft of that
Oh,
one.
wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And, with each draft, I've done more and more outlinings, kind of push
Yes.
myself through the ideas and really
Yes.
organize things better.
Yeah.
Then
That's awesome.
I have a second project that is complete fantasy. And
Yes.
in that one, I went complete, like detailed 14 pages of an outline.
Yes. That's awesome. So
And
you kind of decided to map it out first.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that one it was not planned, truthfully. I was watching a show and there was one scene that I'm like, oh, what if? And that sparked
Yes.
this whole,
Yes.
I sat down for like 2 hours and this whole time I'm just there typing this like insanely detailed outline. It's literally 14 typed pages long,
That is so cool. Just pull.
10,000 words of
Yeah.
an outline. I'm like, this is not how I normally write. I have never really liked doing outlines
Yes.
outside of like,
Yes.
general ideas and notes here. Even when writing academically, I always hated doing outlines.
Yes.
Like, this
Yeah.
is completely out of the norm for me. So now I have 2 completely different writing
Projects.
methods. Yes, and they're both very different types of projects too. One is a contemporary paranormal romance and the other is a
Yes.
fantasy romance. And I mean, I guess
Yes.
they have
Yeah.
the romance in
Yes. Yes.
there's
I
always got to be
completely
a
identify.
little bit, but
Me too. Yeah.
outside of that, there's nothing in common between the two, right
Yeah.
down to my writing methods for them.
Process. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think sometimes like when that sort of that stuff just pours out of you, whether it's the book or an outline. Like, it means that you've hit on something that you're so passionate about. I think that's the right project to run. I'm interested though, like, what is the fandom for the first one?
It is Supernatural.
Oh, okay. I never watched Supernatural because I am like a massive wimp. Like, I was always like, I thought I was pretty scared by it. But I've seen, I know that I know the general idea is like brothers, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's kind of funny that you've never seen it because I thought it would be right up your alley when you were talking about like
Yeah.
your interest in, more of a gothic horror and a little bit of spookiness. There are some
I
episodes that are
know.
definitely like monster heavy, but there are also ones that are just so fueled by emotion. And then there's
Oh,
ones that are just out there. Like
mm.
there's an episode where they are cartoon characters in Scooby-Doo. Like
Oh,
it
amazing. I
gets
love
way
it when they
out
take
there, but
creative
it's
risks like that. That
so
is so cool.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
you never
yeah.
know what you're gonna get with that show.
Yeah, I wish I could. I am just, it sounds really ironic because I do write horror and I write a lot about ghosts and like sort of, paranormal stuff. But yeah, when it comes to reading and watching stuff, I'm like the biggest coward ever. The last horror movie I ever watched was The Ring, like the American version. And
I
I
love that
swore
movie.
I could not sleep for like months after that. I
Oh
couldn't like be in
no.
a dark room with a TV. And I think that's the thing. Like, when people ask me like why I wrote like a mirror book, it's because I am actually just like really scared of mirrors. Like, I refuse to look at them in the dark because I've always had this like fear. And so I kind of was like, well, if it scares me, it probably scares other people. And kind of like writing about it. People are always like, well, how can you write about it when like you can't watch it or read it? And it's because when it comes out of my own head, I know it's not real. Like I know it's not. So it doesn't seem scary to me. But if it comes from someone else, then that's totally real to me. You write about ghosts, and I'm like dead set. I believe it. I believe it. I believe that I will see that ghost like that night. And I'm like, I cannot do it. So I'm always really careful with like the media I consume because it can really scar me. And I can sometimes like read like scary stories and horror and stuff like that, but I do it in the daytime. So sometimes when I read my friends' books or something, I'm like, "Is it got anything scary?" And they're like, "Oh, maybe a little bit." So I'm like, "Okay, it's going to take me longer because I'm not reading it this at night." Like, frankly, no. But I can get scared by very random things. Like, my husband is a massive Doctor Who fan, and there's one, I think it's like the Ninth Doctor. I don't know. Are you a Doctor Who fan?
Yes, I
In the
actually, my youngest child is named after a character in Doctor Who, and she's 7 now. Well, she's almost 8 now. And within the last week, just restarted the whole
started
series from the
watching.
beginning, and we've
Yeah.
been watching it together. So we're on, the first season of new Doctor Who with the
Yeah,
ninth Doctor. Yeah.
ninth. Yeah, I love the ninth. I love the ninth and the tenth. What's her name, by the way?
Her name is River.
Oh my gosh, I love that name. River Song. Yes, it is such a beautiful name. And like, I feel like we're gonna like have spoilers here, but like when you find out the reason for her name, River Song, like I cried like a
Oh my
baby, right?
goodness,
Like, oh my
absolutely.
God, it's so beautiful. It just like, I'm tearing up now. I think it was so well done, that arc. Like, it was just so well done. And I'm just like, it still blows my mind. But yeah, that episode in the Ninth Doctor with the kid in the gas mask
Oh my goodness, we just watched that one today.
scarred me. I could not, like, I literally could, like, every time I like look, like turned a corner, I would think I'd see that kid in a gas mask. And I just was like, I've never watched that episode again because it's like, it was terrifying. It's
Yes, River was
terrifying.
not a fan of that episode. And honestly, that was the first episode of Doctor Who I had ever seen
Yes.
when it was
Yeah. Oh,
originally
really?
airing. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's terrifying.
it
Hey. Yeah.
is. It's spooky stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes I'll be kind of just watching something and thinking it's quite innocent, and then be hit by something and be like, okay, there goes my sleep for the next few months. So I have to be quite careful with the media I consume.
Well, mine definitely has some gothic horror elements, so you'll have to read it in the daytime.
I will have to read it in the daytime. So Luckily, my kids are, like school age now, so I do have like a bit more time during the daytime. Before I was like always like trying to cram everything in the night because I was with my, young, like as you know, when you're with toddlers, you can't get anything done.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, they're a bit older now, so. But yeah, I'm so excited, like because I feel like I think without being like a total wimp, I think I would have really loved Supernatural. So that's really exciting that like you're writing something based on that.
Oh, thank you. I'm very excited about it as well.
Awesome.
So, for anyone who is interested in The Girl with No Reflection, what comparative novels can you recommend for fans?
Yeah, so I guess it is really quite upper YA. So it sort of got crossover appeal. I would say it kind of sometimes strays into like the new adult category. But the characters are very firmly YA. Like I think they're definitely teenagers making teenage decisions. Yes, I'd say that a couple of comparative novels would be, I think, Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lynn Tan is a good one, just because even though that's an adult book, I think that I sort of got the mythology aspects. I think the kind of lyrical prose is something that I went with as well with this book, and just yeah, the sort of I think this book, The Girl with No Reflection, also has inspiration from the Moon Goddess and Archer story. So I sort of, teased that a little bit in my pre-order campaign. I've got a little one-page sort of summary of the Moon Goddess and Archer story, Chinese story, so that, if you read that and then you read the book, you can kind of see some of the parallels that I wrote into it, little Easter eggs. I think I've been told that fans of Judy Eilin's books, so like the Tempest of Tea. No, not a Tempest of Tea. That was another one. The Magic Steeped in Poison duology is sort of a good comparison, and I think some of the like whimsy and fairy tale qualities of Elizabeth Lim's work, so Six Crimson Cranes and things, is also a good comparison. And then finally, I would say I've been told this, and I haven't actually read this book, but it is on my TBR. I own the Fairy Loot edition, which I bought off Marketplace because I don't have, I'm still on the Fairy Loot waiting list. But I bought the secondhand sort of Fairy Loot edition off Marketplace. So it's sitting on my shelf and I definitely want to read it. But I've been told by some of my readers that The Scarlet Alchemist by Kylie Lee Baker, I think it's Kylie Lee Baker, is also a good comparison for this novel. So if you liked that one and like kind of like the darkness of it, then yeah, hopefully you would like this book too. So they're the main ones I can think of.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing all of this with us and our listeners. And
Thank you so
again,
much for having me.
you are so welcome. And congratulations again on the release of The Girl with No Reflection. I cannot wait to get my hands on my copy.
Thank you so much. And I cannot wait to see what you do with your two projects as well. I'm
Oh,
really
thank you.
intrigued.
I will happily keep everyone updated.
Amazing. Thank you. And thanks so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Of course, of course. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Must Love Books. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon under @Must Love Books Podcast. Thank you and happy reading.